The Egghead Island arc, despite initially seeming like just a quick pit stop before heading back on their search for the One Piece, ended up being one of the most chaotic adventures of the entire story. I mean, we had vice admirals, a murder mystery plot, some demons, an ancient robot, and two sun gods all showing up in one condensed arc. Calling all that chaos might be taken lightly, but now that all that has ended, the Straw Hats, accompanied by Bonnie, Kuma, Lilith, and the giant warrior pirates, are ready to put all of it behind them and set sail to the land of the giants. All that's left to do is sit back, party, and enjoy the next few days of peace on the open seas as they casually sail their way over to Elbaf. Or at least that's what was supposed to happen. But Oda, in true Oda fashion, just pulled the wool from over our eyes once again and decided to delay the long-awaited and hopefully Usopp-centric arc for a mysterious adventure focusing on the first 5 Straw Hats. Honestly, I don't know why we didn't see this coming. I mean, Saturn's gone, the Marines are stuck licking their wounds on Egghead, and even if they did try to catch up, the Straw Hats were hours ahead of them. There was literally nothing standing in the crew's way from reaching Elbaf. So, of course, Oda had to throw in one last hurdle to sidetrack us from reaching the island we've been waiting to visit for over 20 years now. But hey, if it's any consolation, we at least got an answer as to what made Dory and Broggy finally leave Little Garden in this chapter. Turns out they simply just needed new weapons, after breaking theirs when they helped the Straw Hats escape 2 years ago. But yeah, apparently their fight to the death is still on. They're just taking a short break from it to help Luffy out. And while I'm sure most of those who read this chapter will end up reacting the same way Usopp did to the news, I'm more in line with the way that Nami reacted to it, because in my opinion, I found myself being at this point kind of fed up with the whole idea of the death battle. They're already off the island, just let them be the co-captains of the giant warrior pirates and move on from it. No reason to really revisit the idea of them fighting to the death, especially when it's already been proven that they're not going to actually fight to the death. But more on that later. For now, we have to talk about Shanks because his appearance in this chapter is just straight up wild. So, you may remember about a month ago, or, well, I guess a month ago in the One Piece World Time, we saw Bartolomeo going around and burning Shanks' flag. Well, Shanks did not take too kindly to that, and eventually the red-haired pirates did end up catching up with Bartolomeo and very easily put him in his place. Also, I want to quickly point out that I'm pretty sure the interaction we're seeing here between these two crews is actually a flashback and not happening in the current day, but the chapter doesn't exactly make that clear. Although, I do kind of wish it was happening in the current day, because I would much prefer for Shanks to be somewhere else than on Elbaf when the crew gets there, but that's just my own personal disappointment with the chapter. Another disappointment I have, though, is that we don't actually get to see the fight between these two. Because, unlike with Kid, it doesn't seem like it was just another one-shot KO. There was actually a battle here between these two crews, or at the very least between the two captains. And despite the fact that I believe Shanks would win 100 times out of 100, I still would have liked to see how it all went down. I'm hoping that when we get to this point in the anime, they extend it by showing at least a bit of the clash, but for now, all we have to go on is the aftermath, which shows Bartolomeo on his knees crying and apologizing to Shanks as he begs for him and his crew's lives. Which, honestly, kinda caught me off guard at first, because even with his quirky personality, I never expected Bartolomeo to be someone who would ever allow himself to be put in this kind of situation. Even if he was moments away from dying, I'd much more expect him to go out flipping his opponent off before ever kneeling before them and begging for his life. So the question is, why is he doing it here? Well, there's two likely reasons. One, he found out about the connection between Luffy and Shanks and immediately became remorseful for disrespecting the mentor of the person he considers his senpai. Or two, and this is probably much more likely given the situation, he realized that they had no chance of winning this fight and that this was the only thing that he could do to protect his crew. Because despite Bartolomeo's rough personality, we do know that he'll go above and beyond and do whatever he can for those he considers friends and actually cares about. We saw this firsthand when it came to Gambia, whose name I just found out when doing research for this video, got attacked by a Vice Admiral, and Bartolomeo went out of his way to get revenge for him, despite knowing that it would put the Navy on his back. And then the same thing happened back on Dressrosa when he saved Bellamy from the Don Quixote family, despite knowing that it'll put him on our bad side. Bartolomeo is more than willing to put his life on the line to protect the people that he's close to, which is why he didn't hesitate to drink the poison that Hongo, whose name I'm also just now learning for the first time, told him to force Luffy to drink. Nothing matters more to Bartolomeo than people he considers friends, and he'll do anything to protect them. And this extreme display of loyalty almost ends up working in his favor, because Shanks does seemingly decide to let him go after this, saying to Ben Beckman that he's happy to see that Luffy has people that care so much for him. It was honestly looking like it was going to be a happy ending for Luffy's biggest fan. Sure, he ended up on the wrong side of an Emperor of the Sea, but luckily enough for him, the Emperor happened to be Shanks, and his loyalty and guts gained him and his crew a second chance. That is, of course, until Yasop entered the scene. So yeah, it seems like the only thing that Yasop hates more than the idea of meeting up with Usopp is letting someone disrespect his captain, as he takes it upon himself to shoot down the Going Luffy, sinking it and the crew just off the coast of Gartel Island. Just like with Kid, it's left unclear if they actually ended up surviving or not, but more than likely because they will be showing up as part of the Grand Fleet of the Straw Hats at the end of the series, that we'll end up finding out that they're fine. Now, it's important to take note that Shanks did not order Yasop to do this. In fact, he was surprised by the fact that Yasop even stepped up to shoot at the ship in this chapter. As far as he's concerned, the matter was dealt with and he was content with how things played out. As you probably know, the Yonko has gained a bit of a reputation both in-world and amongst the fans as being something of a newbie crusher, taking out some of the up-and-coming pirate crews before they really get a chance to make a name for themselves. But now, after this chapter, I'm starting to wonder if it was really him doing all of the crushing, or if it's actually his crew and he's just taking the blame for it. I mean, if you sit down and really think about it, we do have two prime examples of him not exactly being the one to do the crushing, and that is both his crew's interactions with Kid. The first, Shanks wasn't even involved in, and it was actually Ben Beckman who ended up taking Kid's arm. Still not exactly sure on how he ended up doing that when he uses a gun and not a sword, but we do know for a fact that it was him and not Shanks. And then the second time, he was going to sit out the fight once again until he caught a glimpse of the future where Kid's railgun ended up killing all of the weaker pirates in his Grand Fleet. But even then, he stopped at simply knocking out Kid and taking their poneglyph rubbings. It was Dory and Broggy who chose to take out their ship for trying to destroy part of Elbaf. So yeah, maybe it's not so much that Shanks is actually going around and crushing all of these newbie pirates, and more so that he kind of just lets his crew go wild. All in all, kind of a dick move on Yasop's part, which normally I would give a pass to, because at the end of the day, these are two pirate crews that came to blows. That usually does end up with one of the crews being decimated, but because like most biological fathers in One Piece outside of the monkey family, I really do not like Yasop, I'm going to label him as asshole of the chapter. Which is really surprising for him to win that title in the same chapter that Blackbeard appears in, but it kind of just speaks more on my part of how much I hate that character than it does actually for him. Oh, and speaking of Blackbeard, he's finally back on Hashinosu and getting caught up with everything that happened while he was gone, specifically the fact that both Kobe and Moria managed to escape, which I think this is the first confirmation we've gotten that Perona actually managed to get her captain off the island. That was kind of left up in the air as we focused more on the Kobe rescue. And the last time we saw him, she had found him in his cell. He was kind of being hidden by shadows and he didn't move or react to her. But apparently, I guess she did find a way to get him off the island. And I guess we'll see him in a future arc at some point. Because there's no way you put that kind of emphasis on a character and they're not going to play a role later on. Now, of course, Blackbeard's not too happy to find out that his ace in the hole managed to get away. But for some reason, he's putting the sole blame on Pizarro, despite the fact that more than half his crew was also there on the island with him. Personally, I think it's because he knows he can bully Pizarro and won't get much pushback from him. And as we know, Blackbeard doesn't really like picking fights that he doesn't know he can win for certain. And when it comes to more than half his crew, I honestly think they could probably take him. Now, even with Kobe gone, things are still looking up for Teach. Morale on the island is higher than ever, with every pirate there ready to follow their commodore in the battle for the One Piece. And he traded one hero of the Marines for an even bigger one, as we find out that Garp is in fact still alive in the chapter. Though Kuzan does say he intended to kill him, but if we're being honest, it's kind of debatable at this point. Because it is still up in the air of whether or not Kuzan is actually siding 100% with Blackbeard, or if he's working as a double agent. My heart tells me that he actually is sided with Blackbeard because in my opinion that would be much more interesting to see the fall of an admiral to the dark side, but at the very same time, my head tells me that he's most likely a double agent. Anyway, no longer is Garp stuck in limbo, well, metaphorically anyway. The place they have him chained up in definitely looks like it could be called limbo, but now we know for sure that the old man is still alive, which means all the pieces are quickly coming into place for what I like to call God Valley 2.0. All we need is for Kobe to find out that Garp is alive, and for something to happen to put Blackbeard at the very top of Luffy's I Want to Punch list for this epic arc to begin. But for now, Blackbeard has an even bigger bargaining chip to use against the Marines in order to get whatever it is he's after. I know he said he just wants to be recognized as an official king since he is the ruler of Hachinosu, but I really do feel like there has to be much more to it, a reason why he wants access to Mary Joa. The only question is now, what is it? And what is the role that Pudding is going to play in him achieving his ultimate goal? I know he's keeping her around because she's a member of the Jiraiya tribe and he wants to use her to read the poneglyphs once he has all the rubbings, but I feel like the reason why he's keeping her so close to him in the chapter instead of putting her in a jail cell the same way that they have Garp is because he has much bigger plans for her. Question is, once again, what are those plans? Also, it is worth noting that we find out that Teach had put Lafitte in charge of spying on the Revolutionary Army and their attempts to keep the food shortage going on the Red Line. And basically, what he says that they're doing is that every time food is sent up to the Celestial Dragons using one of those blimp-like transporters, the Revolutionary Army ends up shooting it down, and then they set up a blockade around the island, keeping all food supplies from reaching the Red Line. And those who actually do manage to break through the blockade and make it to the Red Line end up getting shot down in one of the blimps anyway. So yeah, despite the fact that we haven't seen Dragon actually do anything on panel, it does seem like his plans are actually working in weakening the Celestial Dragons and the world government. Now Teach does tell Luffy that it's time to simply stop watching and get ready. Ready for what exactly, we have no idea, it's not even hinted to in the chapter, but seemingly he is about to make a big play, possibly against the Revolutionary Army in order to gain favor with the Celestial Dragons. You know what? This plan might actually end up working. I mean, yeah, sure, as far as the Celestial Dragons are concerned, Blackbeard is nothing more than a filthy pirate, but the longer this blockade goes on for, the more they starve. And as far as I can tell, the Marines are no closer to solving the problem. But if Blackbeard and his crew manage to break away through the barricade and stop the Revs from blocking off their access to food, then the Celestial Dragons might be so gracious to them for doing this that they actually end up granting them some kind of reward. And that reward would more than likely end up being the Blackbeard pirates gaining access to Marijoa for at least one day. But I don't know, that's just one idea I had for them to make it there. Which, speaking of the crew's multiple plans to make it onto Marijoa, we do see Katarina, Devon, and Van Ogre make it back to the island with Caribou. But since they don't likely know about Saturn's passing, if she was planning to use him as a way to sneak into the Red Line, that might not end up working out for them. But anyway, that's a problem for much later in the final saga. For now, we had to check back in with the Straw Hats because, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Oda decided to turn what should have been their easy voyage towards the land of the giants into a mysterious new adventure for the original 5 crewmates. As after a bunch of partying, those on board the Great Eric wake up to find the Thousand Sunny and part of the crew missing. And I love how nonchalantly Robin just throws out the idea that they might have been swallowed up by a giant fish, which, as Frankie points out, might actually be a possibility considering the fish that are surrounding them right now are bigger than the Sunny. Now, we do see Nami wake up at the very end of the chapter in a mysterious place dressed in a Viking-like costume, and as of right now, we have no clear idea as to where she is or who the person that was calling to her was, but Oda might have given us a clue as to what exactly is going on. You see, the first thing that Nami says when she wakes up is that she must have drank too much, and back in the beginning of the chapter, we found out that the alcohol that they were all drinking is called the Green Fairy, which can cause hallucinations. So yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. In my opinion, either one or two things are happening. These 5 members of the crew drink themselves into a really intense hallucination, and that's what we see Nami waking up to at the end here, which means we're in for a really wacky mini arc that ultimately is going to be revealed to not have actually happened. That, or after drinking themselves silly, these 5 jumped onto the Sunny and drunkenly sailed off on their own, possibly making it onto Elbaf somehow, which is why we see Nami wearing what she is at the end of the chapter. Could very well be that Prince Loki found them passed out on the shore of the island, and since Loki in Norse mythology is the trickster god, he's just playing one big trick on them. But regardless of which one ends up being, I am kind of torn at this point. On the one hand, I really just want to get to Elbaf already because I feel like we've been waiting way too long to get there. But at the same time, I'm really interested in seeing where this is going. And I know that Oda has a reason for throwing in this detour, possibly to let something big happen on Elbaf before the crew gets there. Maybe something to do with Shanks. Possibly a clash between him and a certain other Yonko the fans have been dying to see since he talked to Whitebeard. But what I do know is that we'll have to wait until the side adventure is over with the original 5 members of the Straw Hat crew before we can finally make it onto the island that we've been waiting for over 20 years.